$1 billion seemed lost at Harrah's Rincon. The cards were down. The chips were gone. Dreams shattered on felt tables under neon lights. But sometimes, when everything appears hopeless, the impossible happens. Sometimes, it takes the eyes of a child to see what adults cannot. Sometimes, the smallest voice carries the biggest truth. At Harrah's Rincon, where fortunes rise and fall like desert winds, one family's destiny hung by a thread. The casino floor stretched endlessly. The stakes couldn't be higher. The fortune seemed lost forever. Then a child stepped forward. What happened next defied every rule of chance, every calculation of probability, every adult assumption about winning and losing. This is the story of how $1 billion seemed lost at Harrah's Rincon until someone did the impossible, until trust replaced fear, until wisdom came from the most unexpected source. Because sometimes, recovering a fortune isn't about the cards you're dealt. It's about seeing the game with fresh eyes. It's about believing when others have given up. The fortune seemed lost. The child proved otherwise. This is their story. Full script, 120,000 characters. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Harrah's Rincon Casino Resort. Inside, beneath the perpetual glow of slot machines and the soft murmur of gaming tables, Robert Whitmore stood at the edge of everything he'd built crumbling away. At 62, Robert had weathered many storms. His construction empire had survived 3 recessions, countless labor disputes, and the volatile real estate markets of Southern California. But this morning, staring at his phone screen showing his company's bank balance, he knew this was different. The numbers told a story of betrayal, of trusted partners who had disappeared with contracts worth nearly $1 billion. "Sir, would you like another coffee?" The voice belonged to Maria Santos, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who had been serving drinks at Harrah's Rincon for over a decade. Her weathered hands held the coffee pot steady, but her eyes held something deeper, the kind of understanding that comes from seeing countless people at their lowest moments. Robert looked up, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "Thank you, Maria. I think I'll need all the caffeine I can get today." Maria poured the coffee with practiced precision. Bad night at the tables. Robert laughed bitterly. If only it were that simple. No, this isn't about gambling losses. This is about trust. About building something for 30 years only to watch it disappear because you believed in the wrong people. The casino floor around them hummed with its usual activity. Elderly couples fed quarters into slot machines with mechanical persistence. A few serious poker players hunched over their cards at the far tables. The morning crowd was always different from the evening rush, quieter, more contemplative, filled with people who had time to think about their choices. "I've seen a lot of people come through here," Maria said, wiping down the small table beside Robert's chair. "Lost fortunes, lost families, lost hope. But you know what I've learned? The game isn't over until you decide it's over." Robert studied her face. There was something in her tone that suggested she spoke from experience, not just observation. Easy to say when you're not staring at bankruptcy. "My husband used to say something similar," Maria continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. "Back when we lost our restaurant in the recession of 2008. 23 years of building that business, gone in 6 months. He sat right here in this casino, in that chair you're sitting in, wondering if it was time to give up." She paused, glancing around the gaming floor before continuing. "But our daughter, she was only 8 then, she came to find him, walked right up to him and said something that changed everything." Robert found himself leaning forward despite his despair. "What did she say?" She said, "Papa, why are you looking for answers in a place that's designed to take things away? The real treasure isn't here. It's in what you know how to build." The simple wisdom of those words hung in the air between them. Robert felt something shift inside his chest, a small crack in the wall of his despair. "Where is your daughter now?" Dr. Isabela Santos Shen. "She's a pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. But she still comes here sometimes to remind me that wisdom doesn't come from age alone." As if summoned by their conversation, a young girl appeared at Robert's elbow. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, with bright dark eyes and a confidence that seemed far beyond her years. "Grandma Maria," the girl said in clear, unaccented English, "Mum sent me to find you." She's finishing her meeting with the hospital board and wanted to know if you could drive me home. Maria's face lit up with unmistakable pride. Robert, this is my granddaughter, Sophia. Sophia, this is Mr. Whitmore. He's having a difficult day. Sophia looked at Robert with the direct, uncompromising gaze that children possess before the world teaches them to look away. Why are you sad in a place that's supposed to be fun? Robert couldn't help but smile, the first genuine expression he'd managed in days. Well, Sophia, I'm not here to gamble. I'm here because sometimes when everything goes wrong, you need to sit somewhere quiet and think. But this isn't quiet, Sophia said matter-of-factly. It's full of noise and lights and people hoping for things that probably won't happen. Her words struck Robert like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were so perfectly, devastatingly true. You're right, he said. So where should someone go to think clearly? Sophia considered this seriously. Somewhere honest, somewhere that doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. Maria placed a gentle hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. Sophia has always seen things differently than other children. Even as a baby, she would stare at people like she could see right through them. I can, Sophia said simply. Most grown-ups have layers of pretending, but sometimes, when they're really scared or really hurt, the pretending falls away. That's when they're honest. Robert felt exposed under her gaze, but also oddly comforted. And what do you see when you look at me? Sophia tilted her head, studying him with scientific precision. You're not really sad about money. You're sad because someone you trusted hurt you. And now you don't know if you can trust anyone again, including yourself. The accuracy of her observation hit Robert like cold water. He looked at Maria, who wore an expression of maternal pride mixed with something approaching awe. She's been like this since she could talk, Maria explained. Her mother says it's because she listens more than she speaks. In a world where everyone's talking, the listeners learn the most. Sophia had not finished her assessment. The money isn't really gone, she continued. Someone moved it, but they left tracks. They always leave tracks. The question isn't whether you can find it. The question is whether you're brave enough to look in the right places. Robert felt his pulse quicken. What makes you think the money can be found? Because thieves are usually not as smart as they think they are, Sophia said with the casual confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. They take things quickly and hide them quickly, but quick decisions leave clues. She looked around the casino floor, taking in the organized chaos of gambling. The systematic way that everything was designed to create patterns of behavior. Casinos know this, she said. That's why they watch everything. That's why they record everything. They know that people reveal their true selves when they think no one is watching. Maria leaned down toward her granddaughter, Sophia. Mr. Whitmore's problems aren't the kind that can be solved with, yes, they are, Sophia interrupted gently. They're exactly the kind that can be solved with watching and listening and remembering that most adults forget to do the simple things. She turned back to Robert. Tell me about the people who took your money, but don't tell me the business things. Tell me the human things. Robert found himself sitting forward, drawn into Sophia's earnest attention. There were 3 partners. I'd worked with them for 15 years. We were building a resort complex in Nevada, our biggest project ever. Were they friends or just business partners? Sophia asked. I thought they were friends. We had dinner together. Our families knew each other. I was at their children's weddings. Sophia nodded as if this confirmed something she already suspected. And when did you start to feel like something was wrong? Robert paused, thinking back. About 3 months ago, they became ... distant, less communicative. They stopped including me in certain decisions. Did they change how they looked at you? The question was so specific, so psychologically astute, that Robert felt a chill of recognition. Yes, they stopped making eye contact. When we'd meet, they'd look at their phones, at papers, anywhere but at me. Guilt, Sophia said simply. They couldn't look at you, because they were already betraying you in their minds. People practice betrayal before they commit it. Maria placed a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sweetheart, these are very serious adult problems. All problems are the same, Sophia said, with quiet certainty. Someone takes something that doesn't belong to them, someone gets hurt, someone has to decide whether to give up or fight back. She looked directly at Robert. The difference is that children haven't learned yet that fighting back is supposed to be impossible. Robert felt something stirring in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in weeks. It might have been hope, or it might have been something even more dangerous, the beginning of belief. "Sophia," he said carefully, "if you were me, what would be the first thing you would do?" Without hesitation, she answered, "I would go back to the beginning. I would look at the first lie they told you, because that's where they made their biggest mistake." "What makes you think there was a first lie?" "Because people don't wake up one day and decide to steal $1 billion. They start with small lies, small betrayals. They test to see if you notice. When you don't notice, they get braver." The wisdom of her words hit Robert with the force of recognition. He began mentally retracing the last year of business dealings, looking for the moments when something had felt slightly off, the conversations that had seemed just a little too smooth. "There was a contract modification," he said slowly, "about 8 months ago. They wanted to change our payment structure, said it would be more tax efficient. I didn't fully understand it, but I trusted their judgment." Sophia nodded sagely. "That was the test. They wanted to see if you would ask questions or just say yes. When you said yes, they knew they could take bigger risks. But how does knowing this help me now? The money is gone. The contracts are signed. My company is hemorrhaging cash and I can't meet payroll next week." Sophia looked around the casino again, her gaze settling on the security cameras mounted discreetly throughout the gaming floor. "Mr. Whitmore, do you know why casinos never lose money? Because the odds always favor the house. No, because they pay attention to everything. They know that if you watch carefully enough, patterns emerge. And patterns reveal truth." She pointed to a security guard making his rounds near the poker tables. "That man has been watching the same 4 players for 20 minutes. Not because they're cheating, but because their betting patterns changed. When people change their patterns, it means something changed in their situation." Robert followed her gaze, beginning to understand. "You think my partners changed their patterns?" Everyone changes their patterns when they're planning something big. They can't help it. The stress makes them act differently. They make phone calls at different times. They go to different places. They spend money in different ways. Maria looked between Robert and her granddaughter with growing amazement. "Sophia, how do you know these things?" "I watch people," Sophia said simply. "At school, at the grocery store, here when I visit you. Most adults think children aren't paying attention, so they act like we're invisible. But invisible means you see everything." She turned back to Robert. "Your partners left tracks. In their phone records, their credit card statements, their travel patterns. But more importantly, they left emotional tracks. Emotional tracks. They hurt someone they cared about. That creates guilt. Guilt makes people do predictable things. They either try to justify what they did, or they try to make up for it in other ways." Robert felt his analytical mind engaging for the first time in weeks. They all started being unusually generous with their families around the same time. Expensive vacations, new cars, private school tuition paid in advance. They were trying to make themselves feel better about what they were planning to do to you, Sophia said. Which means they're not really bad people. They're weak people who made bad choices, and weak people make mistakes. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a woman in her early 40s, professionally dressed, with Sophia's same penetrating dark eyes and Maria's warm smile. "There you are," the woman said, approaching their small group. "Sophia, you know you're not supposed to wander off in the casino." "I didn't wander, Mum. I was helping Mr. Whitmore solve his problems." Dr. Isabella Santosian looked apologetically at Robert. "I'm sorry if she's been bothering you. She has a tendency to insert herself into situations where she thinks she can help." Robert stood, extending his hand. "Dr. Santosian, I'm Robert Whitmore, and your daughter hasn't been bothering me. She's been enlightening me." Isabella's expression shifted as she registered the name. "Robert Whitmore of Whitmore Construction. I read about your company's difficulties in the business section. I'm sorry for your troubles. Your daughter seems to think those troubles might not be permanent." Isabella looked down at Sophia with a mixture of pride and concern. Sophia has always been perceptive, but business and legal matters are complex. "She doesn't understand. She understands people," Robert interrupted. And sometimes that's the most important thing to understand. He knelt down to Sophia's eye level. You've given me a lot to think about. If I follow your advice, if I look for these patterns and tracks you mentioned, what should I expect to find? Sophia considered this seriously. You should expect to find that they moved your money somewhere they thought would be safe. But safe for them means traceable for you, if you know where to look. And if I find it, if I can prove what they did, then you have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Someone who gets revenge, or someone who gets justice. The distinction hit Robert with surprising force. In his anger and despair, he had been focused on punishment, on making his former partners pay for their betrayal. But Sophia was suggesting something more constructive. What's the difference? Revenge is about making them hurt the way you hurt. Justice is about making sure they can't hurt anyone else, and making sure you get back what belongs to you so you can keep building things. Isabella placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head. Where does a 10-year-old learn to think like this? From watching adults make the same mistakes over and over, Sophia said matter-of-factly, and from listening to Grandma Maria's stories about all the people who came to the casino thinking they could fix their problems with luck, when what they really needed was to fix their problems with work. Maria laughed, a sound of pure joy. She's been listening to my stories for years. I never realized she was learning life lessons from them. Robert felt a shift in his perspective, as if someone had adjusted the focus on a camera lens. For weeks, he had been trapped in the emotional chaos of betrayal, unable to see beyond his own pain and anger. But Sophia's clear-eyed analysis had given him something he had lost, a sense of agency, a belief that intelligent action could produce results. Dr. Santosjin, he said, would it be possible for me to take you and your family to dinner? I'd like to continue this conversation, and I'd like to learn more about how your daughter developed such remarkable insights. Isabella hesitated. Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure it would be appropriate. You're going through a difficult time, and Mom, Sophia interrupted. He's not inviting us to dinner because he's sad. He's inviting us because he's starting to have a plan. Robert smiled. The first genuine smile he had managed in weeks. She's right. I am starting to have a plan. And I think your family might have given me the perspective I needed to develop it. Isabella looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. All right, but somewhere quiet where we can have a real conversation, not here. There's a small restaurant in Temecula, Robert said. Family-owned, excellent food, and they have a children's menu that Sophia might enjoy. I don't eat children's food, Sophia said seriously, but I like places where families talk to each other instead of looking at their phones. An hour later, they sat around a corner table at Vineyard Rose, a modest restaurant known for its honest food and unpretentious atmosphere. Sophia had ordered salmon with vegetables, proving her assertion about children's food, and was methodically eating while listening to the adult conversation. Tell me about your investigation process, Robert asked Isabella. As a surgeon, you have to diagnose problems that aren't always obvious. How do you approach situations where you know something is wrong, but you can't immediately see what it is? Isabella considered the question. Surgery is about patterns and evidence. You gather all the data you can, imaging, lab work, patient history. Then you look for what doesn't fit. The anomaly usually points toward the problem. But what if the problem is hidden intentionally? What if someone is trying to conceal evidence? That's actually easier in some ways, Isabella said. Concealment takes effort, and effort leaves traces. When people try to hide something, they often overcomplicate the hiding, which creates more evidence than if they had done nothing at all. Sophia looked up from her salmon. Like when kids at school try to hide that they cheated on a test. They act too normal, which makes them act weird, which makes the teacher notice them. Robert laughed. Exactly like that? Your partners have been acting too normal for months. No arguments, no disagreements, everything running smoothly. In 30 years of business, I've never had a major project run that smoothly. What was your relationship like before? Isabella asked. We fought constantly, not angrily, but passionately. We all had strong opinions about design, materials, timelines, budgets. Some of our best buildings came out of heated arguments that led to creative solutions. Maria leaned forward. And when did the argument stop? Robert paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Right around the time they proposed the contract modification, they stopped challenging my ideas. They started agreeing with everything I suggested. They were managing you, Sophia said quietly, keeping you happy so you wouldn't look too closely at what they were doing. The realization hit Robert with crystalline clarity. They turned me into their partner instead of their equal. They made me feel valued and respected while they systematically dismantled everything we had built together. The question now, Isabella said, is whether you can prove it, and whether you can recover what was taken. Robert pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his contacts. I know someone who might be able to help with that. Marcus Chen, no relation to you. I assume he's a forensic accountant who specializes in corporate fraud. If there are financial tracks to follow, he'll find them. But finding the tracks is only the first step, Sophia said. You still have to decide what to do with what you find. What do you mean? Do you want your money back? Or do you want your company back? Or do you want your friends back? The question hung in the air, more complex than it initially appeared. Robert realized that he hadn't thought beyond the immediate crisis, hadn't considered what success would actually look like. I want my company back, he said slowly. I want to be able to meet payroll and finish the projects we started. I want to honor our commitments to our clients and our employees. And your friends? Isabella asked gently. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I don't think they were ever really my friends. Friends don't betray each other for money. But they were my partners, and we did good work together. If there's a way to resolve this that doesn't destroy them, I'd prefer that. Sophia nodded approvingly. That's justice thinking, instead of revenge thinking. It's also practical thinking, Robert continued, his strategic mind fully engaged now. If I can recover the funds and restructure the partnership, I might be able to save not just my company, but the jobs of everyone who works for all 4 companies. He looked around the table at the 3 generations of women who had, in the space of a few hours, helped him move from despair to determination. I need to ask you something, he said to Sophia. You mentioned that weak people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes should I be looking for? Sophia put down her fork and gave him her full attention. They probably moved the money somewhere they could watch it. Thieves don't like to let their treasure get too far away, so it's probably not in some secret account in another country. It's probably closer than you think. And they probably told someone, Maria added. People can't keep big secrets by themselves. They need to share the burden, usually with someone they trust. Which means there are at least 4 people who know what happened, Isabella concluded. Your 3 partners, and at least 1 other person. 4 people can't keep a secret indefinitely. Robert felt the pieces of a plan beginning to form in his mind. Marcus Chen can trace the financial movements, but I need to understand the human psychology behind this. I need to understand why they did it, and how they justified it to themselves. The why is probably simple, Sophia said. They saw an opportunity to get rich quickly, and they convinced themselves you wouldn't really be hurt by it. How could they convince themselves of that? Because you're successful. Because you've always found ways to solve problems. Because they told themselves you'd figure out a way to recover. The psychological accuracy of Sophia's assessment was breathtaking. Robert could imagine exactly how his partners had rationalized their betrayal. How they had minimized his potential suffering by focusing on his track record of resilience. They underestimated how much this would hurt me personally, he realized. They thought about the financial impact, but they didn't consider the emotional impact of betrayal. They couldn't, Isabella said. If they had really understood how much they were hurting you, they wouldn't have been able to go through with it. People protect themselves from empathy when they're planning to do harm. The conversation continued as they finished dinner, moving from analysis to planning, from understanding to action. By the time they returned to the parking lot of Harrah's Rincon, Robert had a clear sense of his next steps. Thank you, he said to Sophia, kneeling down to her eye level once more. You've given me something I thought I had lost. What's that? Hope and a plan. And the reminder that most problems can be solved if you approach them with the right combination of intelligence and determination. Sophia smiled, the first purely childlike expression she had shown all day. And you've given me something too. What's that? Proof that grown-ups can still learn new things when they really need to. Robert laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. As he drove home that night, he began making mental lists of phone calls to make, people to contact, evidence to gather. The next morning, he called Marcus Chen before 7 a.m. "Marcus, it's Robert Whitmore. I need your help with something complicated." "Robert, I heard about your situation. I'm sorry about what happened. How can I help?" "I need a complete forensic audit of my partnership agreements and financial transactions for the past 12 months. I think my partners have been systematically stealing from me, but I need proof." "That's a big job. Could take weeks, maybe months. I'll pay whatever it costs. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about recovering money. This is about saving my company and protecting the people who work for me." "Understood. When do you want to start?" "Today, this morning, right now." Marcus Chen's office occupied the entire 5th floor of a modest building in downtown San Diego. The space was organized, chaos, computer monitors, displaying financial data, whiteboards covered with flowcharts and calculations, stacks of documents arranged in systems that only Marcus understood. "Your instincts were right," Marcus said, gesturing Robert to a chair across from his desk. "They've been skimming for almost 18 months, but the big theft happened 3 months ago." He turned one of his monitors toward Robert. "Look at this. They established a shell company called Desert Vista Development. On paper, it's a legitimate subcontractor for your Nevada project. In reality, it's a front for funneling project funds into personal accounts." Robert studied the screen, seeing the pattern emerge. "How much?" $847 million. They left enough in the legitimate accounts to keep operations running for a while, but they took almost everything else. The number hit Robert like a physical blow. "Where is it now?" "That's where it gets interesting. They didn't move it offshore. They invested it in real estate development projects right here in California. 3 separate luxury housing developments, all under the control of Desert Vista Development." Robert felt a spark of something that might have been hope. Real estate can be recovered. Real estate can be traced. Exactly. And here's the best part. They used your original business model. They're building the same kind of high-quality, sustainable housing developments that made your company successful in the first place. They stole my money to compete with me using my own methods. Marcus nodded. "It gets better. They've been using your reputation to secure additional financing for their projects. Banks are lending to Desert Vista Development based on the assumption that your company is somehow involved." Robert felt anger and admiration warring in his chest. "They're not just thieves. They're identity thieves. They've stolen my business model, my reputation, and my money. But they made mistakes. Big ones. They rushed the legal structures. They cut corners on the financial documentation. And most importantly, they left a paper trail that leads directly back to your original partnership agreements." Marcus pulled up another screen. "Look at this. Every transfer from your legitimate accounts to Desert Vista Development was authorized using forged documents that bear your signature. But the forgeries are sloppy. A decent handwriting expert would spot them immediately. So we can prove fraud. We can prove fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. But Robert, here's what I think you should consider. Going to court could take years. Even if you win, the legal costs and time delays could destroy what's left of your company." Robert leaned back in his chair, thinking of Sophia's distinction between revenge and justice. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you might have more leverage than you think. Your partners are criminals, but they're not stupid criminals. They know they've left evidence. They know they're vulnerable. And they know that if this goes public, it destroys not just them, but their families and their legitimate business interests. You think they'd be willing to negotiate? I think they'd be desperate to negotiate, especially if you approach it the right way." Robert thought about this. What would the right way look like? Marcus smiled. "That depends on what you really want to accomplish. Do you want to punish them, or do you want to save your company?" "I want to save my company. And if possible, I want to save theirs too. We built something good together before they lost their way. Then here's what I propose. We present them with the evidence. We show them exactly how much trouble they're in. And then we offer them a deal. They return the funds. They restructure Desert Vista Development as a legitimate subsidiary of your company. and they accept reduced partnership stakes as the penalty for their betrayal. They keep their projects, but under my oversight. Exactly, you get your money back, you expand your business into new markets, and you maintain the relationships that made you successful in the first place. They avoid prison and public disgrace, but they have to live with reduced status and constant oversight. Robert considered this carefully. It was more generous than his partners deserved, but it was also more practical than a protracted legal battle. How do we approach them? Very carefully. We need to make it clear that we have overwhelming evidence, but we also need to leave them room to save face. People make better decisions when they don't feel cornered. That afternoon, Robert called his 3 partners and requested a meeting. He suggested a neutral location, the conference room at the Marriott, near the construction site of their Nevada project. He kept his tone professional and calm, giving no hint of what he had discovered. I need to discuss the financial status of our current projects, he told each of them. There are some discrepancies in the accounting that I'd like to clarify. All 3 agreed to meet the following day. Robert spent that evening preparing for the confrontation, but also reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. 24 hours earlier, he had been sitting in a casino, contemplating the end of everything he had built. Now, he had a clear plan and realistic hope for recovery. The difference, he realized, had been the intervention of 3 remarkable women. A grandmother whose wisdom came from years of observing human nature. A surgeon whose analytical skills had helped him see patterns in behavior, and a 10-year-old girl whose clarity of vision had cut through his emotional chaos. He called Maria Santos that evening. "Maria, it's Robert Whitmore. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday. How are you feeling, Mr. Whitmore?" "Better, much better. Your daughter and granddaughter helped me see my situation more clearly. I think I may be able to resolve this." "That's wonderful news. Sophia was very worried about you after we left the restaurant. She was worried about me. She said you reminded her of her grandfather after we lost the restaurant. She said you had the same look in your eyes, like you were trying to decide whether to keep fighting or give up." Robert felt a tightness in his throat. And what did her grandfather decide? He decided to keep fighting, but more importantly, he decided to fight smart instead of fighting angry. It took him 3 years, but he rebuilt everything we lost, and more. "I'd like to meet him. He passed away 2 years ago. But he would have liked you, Mr. Whitmore. He always said that a person's character shows most clearly when they're facing their worst problems." The next morning, Robert arrived at the Marriott conference room 30 minutes early. He arranged Marcus Chin's evidence files on the table, along with a carefully prepared settlement proposal. When his 3 former partners arrived, he was calm and ready. David Kumar, James Morrison, and Patricia Wells entered the conference room with expressions of professional concern, mixed with barely concealed nervousness. They had clearly discussed this meeting among themselves, and developed a strategy for deflecting his questions. "Robert," David said, extending his hand with forced warmth, "you look better than you sounded on the phone yesterday. We've been worried about you." "Worried about the company's financial situation," James added. "We know you've been under tremendous stress." Patricia nodded sympathetically. "We wanted to suggest that maybe it's time to consider bringing in additional investors. Fresh capital could solve a lot of problems." Robert looked at each of them carefully, remembering Sophia's observation about how people's patterns change when they're concealing something. All 3 of his former partners were trying too hard to appear normal, which made their nervousness more obvious. "Please, sit down," Robert said calmly. "We do need to talk about financial matters, but not in the way you might expect." He opened the first evidence file. "I know about Desert Vista development. I know about the transfers. I know about the forged authorization documents. I know about the real estate investments in Riverside, Sacramento, and Bakersfield." The silence in the room was deafening. David's face went pale. James stared at his hands. Patricia looked like she might be sick. "I know about all of it," Robert continued. "The question now is what we do about it." Patricia was the first to speak. "Robert, if you'll let us explain." "I don't need explanations, I need solutions. I need to know that my company will survive, that our employees will keep their jobs, and that the clients who trusted us will get the buildings they were promised." James looked up. "You could send us to prison." "Yes, I could. The evidence is overwhelming. But sending you to prison doesn't solve my problems. It doesn't recover the funds. It doesn't save anyone's job. It just destroys 4 companies instead of saving 1. He opened the settlement proposal. So I'm going to offer you a different option. You return every penny you took. You restructured Desert Vista Development as a legitimate subsidiary of Whitmore Construction. You accept reduced partnership stakes, 25% each, instead of the 33% you held before. And you submit to financial oversight for the next 5 years. David found his voice. And if we agree to this, then we continue to build things together. You keep your freedom, your families keep their reputations, and we all keep our livelihoods. But you work under my oversight, and you never, ever make financial decisions without my explicit approval. Patricia leaned forward. Robert, we never meant for this to hurt you personally. We thought, I know what you thought. You thought I was strong enough to survive losing everything I'd built. You thought I'd find a way to recover. You thought about the financial impact, but not about the emotional impact of betrayal. He paused, thinking of Sophia's wisdom. But the thing about betrayal is that it teaches you who people really are. You're not bad people. You're weak people who made terrible decisions. The question is whether you're brave enough to make better decisions now. The 3 partners looked at each other, communicating silently. Finally, David spoke for all of them. What kind of timeline are we talking about for the fund transfers? 30 days for full restitution, 60 days for the legal restructuring, and immediate cessation of any unauthorized financial activities. James cleared his throat. Robert, the real estate projects we invested in, they're actually performing well, better than we projected. If we liquidate them now, we'll take significant losses. Robert had anticipated this. You don't liquidate them. You transfer ownership to the new subsidiary structure. Desert Vista Development becomes a division of Whitmore Construction, specializing in luxury residential developments. You continue to manage the projects, but under corporate oversight. Patricia looked genuinely surprised. You'd trust us to continue managing the projects we bought with stolen money. I'd trust you to manage projects that belong to my company, with my oversight, under legal contracts that protect everyone involved. The work you've done is actually quite good. You used my methods and my reputation because they work. Now we make it legitimate. The elegance of the solution was becoming clear to all of them. Instead of destroying value through legal battles and forced liquidations, they would create value by integrating the stolen projects into a larger, more diversified company structure. What about our personal liability? David asked. What guarantees do we have that you won't change your mind and prosecute us later? Robert opened another folder. Comprehensive settlement agreement with mutual releases, as long as you comply with the terms. Full restitution, restructured partnership, financial oversight, there will be no criminal referrals and no civil lawsuits. And if we don't comply, then Marcus Chen's evidence files go to the FBI, the IRS, and the State Attorney General's office, along with civil lawsuits seeking treble damages and personal asset forfeiture. The choice was clear. They could accept a generous settlement that allowed them to keep their freedom and continue their careers under oversight. Or they could face criminal prosecution and financial ruin. We need time to discuss this, Patricia said. You have 24 hours. After that, I assume you've decided to take your chances with the criminal justice system. As his former partners filed out of the conference room, Robert felt a complex mixture of emotions. He was proud of his restraint, proud of choosing justice over revenge, but he also felt the deep sadness of realizing that relationships he had valued were built on weaker foundations than he had believed. His phone rang. It was Maria Santos. Mr. Whitmore, I hope I'm not interrupting. Sophia wanted me to call and ask how your meeting went. Robert smiled, despite his emotional exhaustion. Tell Sophia that her advice worked perfectly. I offered them justice instead of revenge, and I think they're going to accept it. She'll be very pleased. She's been talking about you since yesterday. She says you reminded her that adults can be brave when they need to be. Maria, would it be possible for me to take your family to dinner again this weekend? I'd like Sophia to know how her advice turned out, and I'd like to ask Dr. Santosjan about something. Of course. What did you want to ask, Isabella? I want to know if she'd consider joining my company as our Chief Operating Officer. We're going to be significantly larger after this restructuring, and I need someone with her analytical skills and ethical foundation to help me manage the growth." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Whitmore, Isabella is a pediatric surgeon. She saves children's lives, I know, and I wouldn't ask her to give that up. But she could do both. We need someone who understands systems, who can see patterns, who can diagnose problems before they become crises. And we need someone I can trust completely. You should ask her yourself. But I think she might be interested. She's always said she'd like to find ways to help more people than she can reach one patient at a time." That evening, Robert returned to his own home for the first time in weeks. His house felt different, not empty, but peaceful. He had spent so many nights lying awake, consumed by anger and despair. Tonight, he felt the quiet satisfaction of having taken control of his situation. His phone rang at exactly 9 p.m. It was David Kumar. "Robert, we've discussed your proposal. We accept all terms. We'll begin the fund transfers tomorrow morning." "I'm glad to hear that, David. I think this is the right decision for everyone involved." "Robert, I need to say something. What we did was inexcusable. We betrayed your trust and nearly destroyed everything you'd built. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that we're grateful for this opportunity to make things right." Robert considered his response carefully. "David, betrayal always reveals character, both the character of the people who betray and the character of the people who respond to betrayal. I chose to respond in a way that preserves value instead of destroying it. You're choosing to accept responsibility instead of running from it. Maybe that's enough foundation to rebuild on. Do you think we can ever be partners again? Really partners? Not just business associates? I think that depends on what you do with this second chance. Trust can be rebuilt, but it takes time and consistent action. The oversight isn't punishment, it's protection. It protects me from being betrayed again, and it protects you from the temptation to make similar mistakes." The fund transfers began the next morning and continued throughout the week. Marcus Chen monitored each transaction, ensuring that every dollar was properly traced and accounted for. By Friday afternoon, Whitmore Construction's accounts were fully restored, with enough additional capital from the real estate projects to fund expansion for the next 5 years. That weekend, Robert kept his promise to take the Santos family to dinner. This time, they chose a more elegant restaurant in La Jolla, with ocean views and a sophisticated menu that Sophia navigated with the same confidence she brought to everything else. "So your plan worked?" Sophia asked as they waited for their appetizers. "Your plan worked," Robert corrected. "You were the one who suggested looking for patterns and focusing on justice instead of revenge. But you were the one who had to be brave enough to try it." Isabella leaned forward. "Robert, my mother mentioned that you wanted to discuss something with me. I have a proposition. Whitmore Construction is about to become significantly larger and more complex. We're integrating 3 new residential development projects, and we're going to need sophisticated management systems to handle the growth." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to offer you the position of Chief Operating Officer. Part-time initially, so you can maintain your surgical practice, but with the potential to expand your role as the company grows." Isabella looked genuinely surprised. "Robert, I'm flattered, but I'm a surgeon, not a business executive. You're a diagnostician, a systems thinker, and someone who makes life and death decisions under pressure. Those are exactly the skills I need, and you've already proven that you can see patterns that other people miss." Sophia looked up from her bread. "Mum, you always say you wish you could help more people than just the ones who come to your operating room." "That's true, but a construction company helps thousands of people," Sophia continued. "Everyone who lives in the buildings, everyone who works in the offices, everyone whose life is better because of what gets built." Isabella looked at her daughter with amazement. "When did you become so wise about business?" "I'm not wise about business. I'm wise about helping people. And helping people is what both of your jobs are really about." Robert nodded. "Sophia's right. At its core, construction is about creating spaces where people can live, work, and build their own dreams. Surgery is about giving people the health they need to pursue those dreams. They're different methods, but the same fundamental purpose." Isabella considered this. What would the position involve, practically? Systems analysis, process improvement, quality control, personnel management, all the analytical skills you use in medicine, applied to business operations. And the ethical framework you've developed in healthcare, applied to corporate decision-making. How much time, commitment? Initially, perhaps 10 to 15 hours per week. As we grow, potentially more, but always structured around your surgical schedule. Patient care comes first, always. Isabella looked around the table at her family. Maria was nodding encouragingly. Sophia was watching her mother with intense interest. Can I think about it? Of course. But while you're thinking, consider this. Your daughter has already shown that she has remarkable insights into human behavior and problem solving. Maybe she inherited those abilities from someone who combines analytical intelligence with genuine care for other people's well-being. Sophia smiled. Mum, you should do it. Mr. Whitmore needs someone who won't let him get betrayed again. And you're really good at seeing when people aren't telling the truth. After dinner, as they walked along the beach in Loyola, Robert found himself walking beside Sophia while Isabella and Maria talked quietly behind them. Sophia, I want to ask you something. How did you know that my partners could be convinced to return the money? Sophia picked up a piece of sea glass and examined it in the evening light. Because they weren't really thieves. They were people who made a mistake and then kept making bigger mistakes to cover up the first mistake. How could you tell the difference? Real thieves don't feel guilty. They don't try to make their families feel better by buying them expensive things. They just take the money and disappear. She handed him the sea glass. But people who make mistakes keep hoping they can fix things. They keep trying to find ways to make up for what they did wrong. That hope makes them willing to accept solutions that let them fix their mistakes. Robert examined the smooth green glass, polished by years of ocean waves. And if they had been real thieves, then your only choice would have been to call the police and hope for the best. But they weren't. They were just people who got scared and made bad choices. How did you get so good at reading people? Sophia looked out at the ocean, considering the question seriously. I think it's because I'm not afraid of what I might see. Adults are afraid that if they look too closely at other people, they might see something that disappoints them or hurts them. So they don't look, and children aren't afraid of being disappointed. Children expect adults to be complicated and imperfect. We're not surprised when grown-ups make mistakes. We're surprised when they refuse to admit they made mistakes. The wisdom of her observation struck Robert with the force of revelation. His partner's betrayal had been painful not because they were evil, but because he had built his trust on the assumption that they were better than they actually were. So the solution isn't to stop trusting people, he said slowly. The solution is to trust people to be human, with all the weaknesses and potential for growth that being human involves. Exactly, Sophia said. And when you trust people to be human, you can build systems that help them make good choices instead of systems that only work if everyone is perfect. 3 months later, Robert stood in the conference room of Whitmore Construction's new headquarters, looking out at a room filled with employees, partners, and clients, celebrating the completion of their Nevada resort project, 6 months ahead of schedule and significantly under budget. The integration of Desert Vista development had been remarkably smooth. David, James, and Patricia had embraced their reduced roles with something approaching gratitude, working diligently under Isabella's oversight to prove that they deserved the second chance they had been given. Isabella had accepted the coup position and had quickly proven herself invaluable. Her medical background had given her unique insights into organizational health, and her analytical skills had identified inefficiencies that had been costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. But perhaps most importantly, the company culture had evolved. The near collapse had forced everyone to examine their assumptions about trust, accountability, and shared responsibility. The new systems Isabella had implemented weren't designed to prevent betrayal. They were designed to make betrayal unnecessary by ensuring that everyone's interests were aligned. Maria Santos had been hired as the company's director of employee relations, bringing her decades of experience reading people and understanding human motivation. Her first initiative had been to establish regular family dinners where employees could discuss problems, concerns, and suggestions in informal settings. and Sophia had become the company's unofficial consultant on human behavior. Once a month, she attended management meetings as an observer, offering insights that consistently surprised and enlightened the adults in the room. As the celebration wound down, Robert found himself standing on the balcony with Sophia, looking out at the city lights of San Diego. "Are you happy with how everything turned out?" Sophia asked. "I'm grateful," Robert said. "That's different from happy, but maybe better." "Why is grateful better than happy?" "Because happiness can make you complacent. Gratitude makes you want to deserve the good things you've received." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "And do you feel like you deserve it?" "I feel like I learned something important. About trust, about forgiveness, about choosing to build instead of destroy. Maybe that's worth deserving." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights of the city spread out below them. "Mr. Whitmore," Sophia said eventually, "do you remember what you were thinking about when you were sitting in the casino that first day?" "I was thinking about giving up. I was thinking that maybe I was too old, too tired, too hurt to start over." "And now?" Robert smiled. "Now I'm thinking about what we're going to build next. Your mother has identified 3 new markets where we could expand. Your grandmother thinks we should develop affordable housing for seniors. And you've suggested that we should build a children's hospital? All of those are good ideas," Sophia said seriously. "But which one excites you the most?" Robert considered this. "The children's hospital. Because it combines everything we've learned about building things that matter with everything your family has taught me about helping people. Then that's what we should do next." As they walked back inside, Robert reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been sitting in a casino, contemplating the ruins of everything he had built. Tonight, he was standing in the headquarters of a company that was larger, stronger, and more purposeful than anything he had previously imagined. The difference, he realized, hadn't been luck or chance, or the random fortunes of business. The difference had been the intervention of people who saw clearly, thought wisely, and chose to help, rather than ignore someone in crisis. $1 billion had seemed lost at Harrah's Rincon, but what had really been lost was his faith in people, his belief in the possibility of recovery, his hope for the future. And what had been recovered was something far more valuable than money. It was the understanding that trust, when broken, can be rebuilt on stronger foundations. That betrayal, when faced with wisdom and courage, can become the foundation for deeper relationships. That businesses, like people, can emerge from crisis not just intact, but transformed. The fortune had never really been about the money. It had been about the capacity to keep building, keep trusting, keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. And that fortune, once recovered, could never be stolen again. As the last guests departed and the lights dimmed in the conference room, Robert gathered his things and prepared to go home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions to make. But tonight, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Complete confidence that whatever came next, he had the wisdom, the support, and the systems in place to handle it well. Sometimes, the impossible happens not through luck or magic, but through the simple application of clear thinking, ethical action, and the courage to choose construction over destruction. Sometimes, recovering what seems lost forever is just a matter of looking at familiar problems with fresh eyes and trusting that most people, given the right opportunity and incentives, will choose to do the right thing. Sometimes, it just takes a child to remind us that adults can still learn, still grow, still change course when necessary. And sometimes, that reminder is all we need to do the impossible. The fortune was recovered. The company was rebuilt. The relationships were restored. And in the end, everyone involved discovered that what they had built together was stronger and more valuable than anything they could have created alone. Sometimes, risk brings the greatest reward. Sometimes, a second chance can change everything. Sometimes, trust, patience, and strategy can turn despair into triumph. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to believe that the impossible is just another word for something that hasn't been tried yet. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that setbacks can become comebacks, and that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a situation that seemed impossible until someone helped you see it differently? We'd love to hear your story. Remember, the fortune that matters most isn't what you accumulate, but what you're willing to build, rebuild, and share with others. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.